At 50 feet above the water, moving at 260 miles per hour, an American bomber needed exactly 4 seconds to fire 748 rounds into a Japanese warship. And the men who flew it had to train themselves to ignore every instinct telling them to turn away. This video covers the 345th Bomb Group, the unit known as the Air Apaches, and the strange weapon they built out of an ordinary medium bomber. It covers how a plane designed to drop bombs from 3 miles up was rebuilt to attack ships from the height of a telephone pole, and one mission where its commander flew into the most heavily defended Japanese base in the South Pacific, with no fighter escort and an order to turn back that he claimed he never received. Stay until the end, because what the Japanese Navy said about these aircraft after the war is something almost no one expects, and it changes how you see every gun barrel on the one that still survives today. The B-25 Mitchell arrived in the Pacific in 1942 as a normal medium bomber. It had a glass nose for a bombardier, a Norden bomb sight, and a crew trained to fly high, drop bombs on a calculated point, and come home. Against ships, it failed. The Norden bomb sight needed a stable, level approach from high altitude to calculate where a bomb would land. The problem was simple: Japanese ships moved. By the time a bomb fell from over 10,000 feet, the ship had sailed out from under it. Tropical weather in the Southwest Pacific made the stable approach even harder. The hit rates were so low that senior American commanders called them inadequate. So a field modification program began in 1942, driven by an engineer named Paul Irvin Gunn, known to everyone as Pappy Gunn, working alongside a North American aviation representative named Jack Fox. According to the Encyclopedia of Arkansas and multiple aviation histories, Gunn ripped out the glass bombardier nose, replaced it with a solid metal plate, and bolted forward-firing 50 caliber machine guns into the front of the aircraft. The plane was no longer a bomber that dropped bombs from above. It was something the Doctrine manuals had no name for. It attacked from 50 feet. The new weapon got its first real test in March 1943 at the Battle of the Bismarck Sea. Japan was trying to move nearly 7,000 troops from Rabaul to Lae in New Guinea. They sent 8 transport ships protected by 8 destroyers. American and Australian aircraft, including the modified B-25 Strafers of the 3rd Bomb Group's 90th Squadron, attacked the convoy at low altitude over 2 days. According to the Flight Journal account of Pappy Gunn and multiple military histories, the coordinated attack destroyed the entire convoy. All 8 transports were sunk. 4 of the 8 destroyers went down with them. Nearly the entire Japanese reinforcement force never reached its destination. That result changed everything. The proof was overwhelming. Another unit was redirected from England to the Pacific, specifically to fly the concept the Strafers had just proven. That unit was the 345th Bomb Group, the Air Apaches. They were the first fully trained and equipped American air group sent to the South Pacific, and they took the idea further than anyone expected. The factory version of the Strafer carried 8 forward-firing guns in the nose. The armament teams of the 345th were not satisfied. They bolted additional gun pods to the sides of the fuselage, 2 guns per pod, 2 pods, plus extra installations on the cheeks of the nose. On their most heavily modified aircraft, this brought the total to 14 forward-firing 50 caliber machine guns. Here is what that meant in practice. Each gun fired roughly 800 rounds per minute, which is about 13 rounds per second. 14 guns firing at once put approximately 180 rounds into the air every second. A Japanese destroyer was between 300 and 350 feet long. At 260 miles per hour, the B-25 covered about 380 feet every second. That meant the destroyer sat inside the bomber's effective firing range for roughly 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, the aircraft delivered approximately 748 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition, each one capable of punching through light armor or igniting on contact with fuel. No exposed gun crew survived the first pass. No bridge crew could keep directing fire. The ship could still float. It could not keep fighting. The opening seconds of the approach stripped away its ability to shoot back. Then came the bombs. Released at 50 feet, they did not drop from above. They hit the water at a shallow angle and skipped across the surface like a stone, slamming into the hull at the waterline where the armor was thinnest. This was called skip bombing. Timed fuses gave the pilot about 2 seconds to clear the ship before it exploded behind him. Bolting guns to a plane was easy. The hard part was the approach itself. A pilot had to fly a 30,000-pound aircraft directly at something that was shooting at him, hold a perfectly straight line while it did, and not break away until the exact release point. Every instinct built up over 2 years of combat said the same thing. Something is firing at you, do not fly toward it. The Air Apaches beat that instinct out of themselves through repetition. They flew the approach over and over until the urge to turn away was overwritten by the knowledge that the geometry worked only when the line was held, and failed when it was not. For the men in the back of the aircraft, it was worse. The radio gunner sat in the rear, behind the nose, unable to see the target, the water rushing below, or the ship filling the windscreen. He could only feel the twin engines at full power, the airframe shaking at the frequency of 50 feet above the water, and then the 14 guns opening up in a sustained, tearing roar that traveled through the aluminum and into the soles of his boots. Then a shadow passed over the canopy. The ship. Less than a second. The guns went quiet, the engines pulled up, and he was still alive. One technical sergeant named Robert Castee flew 104 of those missions before early 1945, more than any other man in his squadron. He had no control over whether the pilot held the line. That was not his job. His job was to sit in the back while the pilot held it, come home, and climb back in the next morning to do it again. On the morning of October 18, 1943, 36 B-25s of the 345th formed up over the coast of New Guinea, led by Lieutenant Colonel Clinton True in an aircraft named Red Wrath. Their target was Rabaul, the most heavily defended Japanese base in the entire Southwest Pacific. A harbor, an airfield network, and a supply hub fortified over 2 years with anti-aircraft batteries, fighter squadrons, and naval guns. Every previous American attack on Rabaul had required fighter escort. True went in without one. According to the iModeler account drawn from interviews with 345th pilots, a recall order was sent through the storm front. True later said his radio operator never received it. The rest of the formation turned back. True kept going with the aircraft still behind him. Japan had not prepared its defenses for an unescorted attack in those weather conditions. The damage assessment reflected it. The 345th destroyed 41 aircraft on the ground, sank 3 ships, and shot down a large number of defending fighters, against the loss of only 2 B-25s. 3 days later, True stood in General George Kenney's office in Brisbane. The local newspapers that morning carried headlines about MacArthur's daring new tactics over Rabaul. Kenney had already read them. According to the iModeler account, Kenney did not believe the radio failure story any more than anyone else did. But in view of the results, a court-martial was not what the moment called for. Instead, Kenney awarded True the Distinguished Service Cross. The 345th went on to earn a Distinguished Unit Citations for the Rabaul operations. The Army had been ready to court-martial True for what he did. Then the results came in, and the Army gave him a medal instead. That is the exact mechanism by which a doctrine gets quietly rewritten. Someone proves it wrong in a way command cannot ignore, and command finds a way to credit the proof without admitting the rule was wrong. The approach never got safer. As Japan's position grew more desperate, its shipping moved into more heavily defended waters, and the 345th followed it, through New Guinea, Biak, and on to the Philippines. The losses were constant. At Kaviang in February 1944, the 345th flew in behind a first wave that had already set the harbor's fuel dumps on fire. The supply dumps were still exploding, throwing burning debris up into the path of aircraft flying at 50 feet, and dense smoke closed around the bombers as they came through. First Lieutenant Thane Hoeks, who had held the line over Rabaul and used the same profile to sink a Japanese corvette, took a hit to his right engine in that smoke. At 50 feet with one engine, there was no altitude to trade for speed. His aircraft went down in flames. 4 B-25s from the 345th did not come back from Kaviang that day. By the end of the war, the 345th's record stood at 260 ships sunk and 275 damaged across 26 months of combat. The cost, according to the 345th Bomb Group Association, was 712 men dead and 177 aircraft lost. Then there is the verdict that almost no one expects. According to the operational history of these units, post-war Japanese naval testimony assessed the B-25 gunship attacks as more destructive to the Pacific supply chain than submarines, more accurate against shipping than dive bombers, and more versatile against a wider range of targets than torpedo planes. The Army Air Forces had sent those planes to the Pacific as ordinary medium bombers meant to fly high and drop bombs. They came home as the most effective ship killers in the theater. The factory eventually built what the field had proven. North American aviation put the solid gun nose on the production line, building thousands of Strafer-configured B-25s. The doctrine that said medium bombers fly at medium altitude ended up producing, at scale, an aircraft specifically designed to fly at 50 feet and fire everything it carried straight ahead. In August 1945, the 345th received its final mission of the war. 2 Japanese Betty bombers carrying the peace delegation that would begin the surrender negotiations needed an escort. The Betty was the same aircraft type the Air Apaches had spent 26 months hunting at low altitude over the Pacific. The group that had built the masthead attack and lost 712 men proving it worked, formed up alongside the peace delegation and brought them in safely. 9 days later, the war ended. One of those aircraft survives today, on static display at the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio. 14 gun barrels face forward from the nose, and the pods bolted to the fuselage. The plane is not moving, and never will again. Not at 260 miles per hour, not at 50 feet, not with a Japanese destroyer filling the windscreen and 4 seconds left on the run. Every ship it was built to destroy is on the floor of the Pacific. Its guns point at nothing now, but they will look different once you know what they were for.